The wealthy cowboy,
This
Daniel
changes
Hartman,
everything.
was known across the valley as a man who owned more land than anyone else and spoke less than most. His boots had crossed thousands of acres. His hands had signed contracts worth millions. Yet his heart carried a quiet loneliness no money had ever touched. One late afternoon, while riding the far edge of his ranch, where the grass thinned and the wind carried a strange silence, Daniel noticed something he had never seen before. A broken old cabin crouched near the tree line, half swallowed by weeds and time. Smoke rose faintly from its crooked chimney, thin and stubborn, like a breath refusing to die. Curious, Daniel dismounted and walked closer, sensing this place did not belong in his world of wealth and order. As he approached, the cabin door creaked open and a woman stepped out. Her clothes worn, her eyes tired yet fiercely alive. Her name was Clara. She lived alone, surviving on scraps, fixing what could not be fixed, refusing help she could not trust. Daniel learned she had lost everything years ago: her family, her land, her hope, all swallowed by bad luck and cruel people. The cabin was all she had left. That night, as Daniel rode back to his mansion, the image of the woman standing defiantly before that collapsing shelter burned into his mind. For the first time in years, his wealth felt heavy, and sleep did not come easily. He didn't know it yet, but seeing that cabin had cracked something open inside him, something that would change both their lives forever. If this story already touches your heart, subscribe now. The next chapter will surprise you. The next morning, Daniel returned, not with lawyers, not with charity papers, but with supplies and silence. Clara did not trust him at first. Men like him usually came with conditions, promises that faded like dust in the sun. But Daniel kept coming back. He fixed the broken roof with his own hands, brought food without asking for thanks, listened without trying to solve everything at once. Slowly, Clara's walls began to soften. She told him how the cabin once belonged to her parents, how greed had pushed her out of a better life, how pride kept her standing when nothing else did. Daniel realized something painful. All his success had come at the cost of ignoring people like her. One afternoon, he made a choice that stunned everyone. He signed over a portion of his land surrounding the cabin, legally transferring ownership to Clara, no strings attached. The valley buzzed with disbelief. Why would a wealthy cowboy give land to a woman living in poverty? But Daniel felt lighter than he ever had. Clara wept, not because of the land, but because someone finally saw her as worthy. Together, they rebuilt the cabin, plank by plank, trust by trust. And in doing so, Daniel rebuilt something inside himself, a sense of purpose money had never given him. Subscribe now, because the final chapter reveals the moment that changed everything. Months passed, and the old cabin was no longer broken. It stood strong, warm, alive, just like Clara. With the land Daniel gave her, she started a small ranch of her own, helping others who had nowhere to go. Word spread, and soon the place became a refuge for the forgotten. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Daniel stood outside the cabin once more, but this time he wasn't alone in his silence. Clara stood beside him, no longer afraid, no longer invisible. Daniel confessed that seeing her that first day had changed him more than any deal or fortune ever had. He admitted that wealth meant nothing if it didn't lift others up. Clara smiled, knowing they had saved each other in different ways. The wealthy cowboy who once rode past suffering without noticing had become a man defined, not by what he owned but by what he gave. And the woman who lived in an old cabin had become a symbol of resilience, dignity, and second chances. What Daniel did that day amazed everyone, but what truly mattered was what he became afterward. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, life-changing stories. Just when life around the cabin had begun to feel peaceful, the past returned like a storm Clara never saw coming. One morning, unfamiliar trucks rolled onto the dirt road near her land, raising dust and unease. A man stepped out, sharp suit, cold eyes, and a smile that carried no warmth. He was Henry Caldwell, a developer who had once played a role in stripping Clara's family of their original property years ago. Now, seeing the growth around the cabin and the attention it had gained. He wanted it all back. Henry claimed legal loopholes, threatened lawsuits, and mocked Clara's humble beginnings, assuming fear would bend her again. But this time Clara did not stand alone. Daniel arrived, calm and unshaken, carrying documents that proved the land transfer was ironclad. What shocked Henry most was not the paperwork, but Daniel's refusal to back down. The wealthy cowboy who once avoided conflict now stood firmly between greed and justice. The confrontation drew the attention of the valley, and people who had been helped by Clara stepped forward in her defense. Faced with unity he couldn't manipulate, Henry retreated, humiliated and powerless. As the dust settled, Clara realized something profound. Her fear no longer controlled her. That day she didn't just keep her land, she reclaimed her voice. If you're enjoying this journey, subscribe now. The final chapter delivers a powerful and unforgettable conclusion years later. The old cabin was no longer just a home. It had become a symbol. Children laughed where silence once lived. Strangers arrived broken and left hopeful. Daniel's wealth still existed, but it no longer defined him. He spent less time counting acres and more time counting lives changed. One quiet evening, Daniel and Clara sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in colors neither of them could name. There was no grand speech, no dramatic promise, only understanding. They had built something rare together: trust, respect, and a shared purpose. Daniel realized that the most amazing thing he had done that day years ago wasn't giving land or money, but choosing compassion when it would have been easier to ride away. Clara, once a woman surviving in an old cabin, had become a light for others lost in the dark. And the wealthy cowboy who saw her that day became something far greater than rich. He became human. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that change the way we see the world. Time has a way of revealing who people truly are. As the seasons turned, Clara's land flourished into something no one could have imagined in those early days of broken boards and borrowed tools. The refuge grew, not large or wealthy, but honest. People came with stories heavy with loss, and they left with work, dignity, and a sense of belonging. Daniel watched all of it quietly, never claiming credit. Yet the valley knew the truth. The wealthy cowboy had chosen a different path, one that didn't measure success in profit, but in people lifted from despair. One evening, Daniel faced a decision that would define the rest of his life. A powerful corporation offered him a deal worth more money than he had ever seen, but it required buying back the land he had given Clara and clearing the refuge. The offer tempted every instinct he once lived by. But when Daniel looked at the cabin, now glowing with lamplight and laughter, he saw something money could never replace. He refused the deal publicly, choosing integrity over fortune. The news spread fast, stunning the business world. For Clara, that refusal meant more than protection. It meant proof that some promises are permanent. That night, standing beneath the open sky, Daniel admitted that his life finally made sense. Not because of what he owned, but because of what he stood for. If you believe true wealth is measured by character, subscribe now. The final chapter brings the story home. Years later, travelers still spoke of the old cabin, though it was no longer old in spirit. They said everything changed because one man chose to stop, to see, and to care. Children who once slept hungry grew into adults who carried the same kindness forward. Clara became a quiet leader, never seeking attention, only impact. Daniel remained the cowboy of the valley, but history would remember him not for his land or fortune, but for the day he chose compassion over comfort. On the porch of the cabin where it all began, Daniel and Clara sat once more, watching the sun sink behind the hills. There was peace between them, not loud, not dramatic, but earned. The wealthy cowboy had seen a woman living in an old cabin, and what he did that day amazed everyone. But the true miracle was what followed: a life redirected, a community reborn, and a legacy built from a single act of humanity. And that is the reminder this story leaves behind. Sometimes, changing the world doesn't start with power or money. but with the courage to care. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that inspire hope, compassion, and real change.